facility as a bill. So at the previous meeting in January, this was presented as a potential acquisition or a long-term lease. Since 1999, the department has been leasing 19 acres of that overall 44-acre parcel and has fenced it and incorporated into the research facility. In January, the commission recommended that we acquire the full 44-acre parcel and granted the department authorization to proceed with negotiations. Per the commission's authorization, we have negotiated with the landowner and have agreed to a purchase price of $52,000 based on the appraisal that was completed. So at this time, we're just asking for final approval from the commission to move forward with that transaction.
I hope we accept the department's recommendation.
Second. It is moved by Commissioner Pete Doobie and seconded by Richard, Commissioner Richard. And any discussion? Any question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes take it.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Next agenda item I have is the Healy Public Access Area, which is located approximately 6 miles northeast of Buffalo off Highway 16. The commission has historically provided public access for fishing through a cooperative agreement with the M&M Ranch. The Wyoming Water Development Commission recently acquired the property surrounding Healy Reservoir and has agreed to enter into a new cooperative agreement with the commission to continue to provide access to the reservoir for a 10-year term. The Healy Reservoir is one of the most heavily used in the Sheridan region and provides a unique opportunity in the region for fish for warm water species, including bass, perch, and tiger muskie. Current estimates for use are at 5,000 angler days per year, and winterized fishing has increased with the transition from trout fishing to warm water species. Per the agreement, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department will have the option to enhance the existing public access there through the construction of a comfort station, enhancements to the boat ramp, road, and just the facilities in general. The department would have annual maintenance costs that would come out of the Habitat and Access budget. And at this time, the department's recommending that the commission vote to approve entering into this agreement with the Wyoming Water Development Commission.
I'd just like to say that this area has an extreme amount of use for the residents in Buffalo to that Sheridan area. It's very, very, very popular fishing spot. It's nice to see some enhancement done to it. So I fully support it.
This is South Buffalo.
Let's take more than use.
Any other questions?
I'll look to accept the department's recommendation.
It is moved by Commissioner Pete Doobie and seconded by Commissioner David Bird that we accept the proposed advice of the Game and Fish. So, regarding Sean David had just presented. So, any further discussion? Question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to mention that there was a third agenda item on the notebook for the exchange regarding the Sam Ranch. That will be presented at a future date after we've had the opportunity to work on some more items with regard to that project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Agenda number 14. Agenda Gregorian.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, Director Nesbitt, I'm here to present Chapter 31 today, and this is the regulation governing our licensed selling agents. In this regulation, we are making no legislative changes to this regulation, and so I'm just going to highlight a few other changes to this regulation, but most of it is just clarifying language. Previously, this regulation, when you read through it, it was a little confusing. And it also was a little confusing to our licensed selling agents as to the next steps or where they went from here. So really, all of these changes are really to clarify and make it a simpler to read, easier to understand regulation for our licensed selling agents. And then also the big one is to clarify the filing of the monthly license reports and what constitutes and the notification for those late license reports. And I'll talk more about that when I get there. As you can see, I went through the draft regulation and I highlight in blue the new language, and then in red is the strike through the other language. And so as you can see, most of it's just strictly clarification of the language. Approval is become application approval. So just a lot of clarifying language on this. So this really is the section on how licensed selling agents are appointed. It does require them to travel to Cheyenne once they're appointed to do a training session with the department, and that's been very beneficial to our agents. We do require that. Just a continuation of that section on the appointment of licensed selling agents. All of these changes are pretty much grammatical. Section B does say that the agent of record shall agree to the electronic licensing system. It's just a change from must. Section 7 used to be Section 17, so the renewal of licensed selling agents. All of B has been stricken and has been replaced with new language that is much clearer, but basically states the same language. Existing licensed selling agents may not be approved if there's changes to the original information in their application that was originally approved by the commission. And then this language is straight from a different section. Section 16 is what the department, at the direction of the Attorney General representative, how we can use the annual bond fee that licensed selling agents pay every year when they renew. They're required to submit a $50 bond payment by December 1st of each year. And this was language that was previously just in separate sections.
Mr. President.
Commission President, Commissioner Crank, that is correct.
Is that by our rulemaking authority or statutory?
Commission President, Mr. Crank, that is by statute. It's prescribed in Wyoming Statute 23-170. So this section, Section 20, monthly license sales reports, this is where the major change occurred. That's not only clarification language, but also at the direction that the commission had provided, as well as our Attorney General representative, some language in clarifying when we expect licensed selling agents to make their monthly payment for previous sales from the previous month. And this language is very similar. They were always due on or before the 10th of the month at our Cheyenne office. That was received, not postmarked. So that language did not change. It is just clarified. There is language that was added in section A2 that said if those payments are not received by the 10th of the month in Cheyenne, that the licensing manager will contact those agents and suspend their account until we receive payment. And we were directed to move to this because we were getting a lot of payments that were received late, and then as they didn't continue to pay, it just built up debt, and then if something happened and we canceled those agents, or they filed for bankruptcy, then the department was trying to collect larger sums of money from these agents. So now, if we don't receive their payment on the 10th in Cheyenne or before, then we call them and we lock and suspend their account. So it just locks it as soon as we get payment. The next day we call them, we turn them back on. But that is kind of a major change here. And it is one that we've had some conversations with our licensed selling agents. agents about. We have approximately 230 agents, active agents, and we churn out probably sometimes around 15 to 25 agents a month. Kind of just depends on when the 10th falls. Like this month, they got a little bit of a leeway because we were actually closed and snowed in Cheyenne. So by the time we got back in, that mail had been here, so we didn't suspend as many, but initially it was going to be about 40. Most agents have their payments to us if it's not by the 10th. Most of them are there within 3 or 4 days, if not the next day. Some have taken up to 2 weeks or more before we actually get their payment. So that's, if you were contacted by licensed selling agents, that's probably the biggest comment other than credit card fees that we heard regarding the change to Chapter 30. This is just a continuation of the monthly license reports, and this just details how we notify them. And if we don't have their report, a lot of the language is still very similar. We contacted them, we sent them certified letters so we could track when they received it and when we received their payment back. But they have 3 days to have that, within receipt of that, to have their check mailed. This is just a continuation of the notification of late reporting and processes for licensed selling agent and suspension and cancellation as outlined in this regulation. And then for cancellation, the agent must request a hearing before the commission. And you guys actually have a request for a hearing of a canceled agent later this summer. And in what used to be section 23, now section 24, was proceedings of administrative suspension or cancellation, and the administrative suspension language throughout the whole section was stricken. I didn't want to put everywhere in here, but now it's just cancellations. We did hold 2 public meetings around the state. We went to Casper on the 29th of January. We had 2 members of the public show up. They were one licensed selling agent out of Glendale. We had a really good conversation with them. It was a very productive meeting. Some things that were really good that didn't necessarily have to deal with Chapter 31, but it was great to get out and talk to some of our licensed selling agents. And then the next night we met Lander and didn't have any questions. We did receive 4 public comments, which are in your notebook, that were submitted online. And we did receive 1 written comment that's in your notebook as well. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Jennifer, what sort of a window do we have if they're late on their payment? Is it the one business I'm talking about has been very adamant about the approach method that we have. The letter that we write that it's not on intent to be shut off. Just the letter itself puts them in a defensive position. Greg, you and I talked about this, I think, last year. This particular vendor has sells $4 million worth of licensing. Our argument is, not an argument, but our position is that it's not the 10th and we shut them off. But I don't think we do that. And I don't think you've ever done that if it's on the 12th or 13th or 14th. Is that right?
So Commission President, so in regards to the letter, that letter is always a follow-up to a personal conversation. We personally contact each of the stores before we turn them on. We feel that's very important so their clerks don't go to log in. They logged in this morning, sold several licenses, and all of a sudden it says they're closed and can't sell licenses. So we always make a personal follow-up call to them and then follow that up with a letter. So on the 10th, or actually on the 11th, we go through everything that's been processed, recorded, and everything that we received in the mail. We wait until mail is received on the morning of the 11th because it could have been in Cheyenne on the 10th, just sitting at the post office. So we do give them that benefit. And then we look through, see where we're at, and then make, I provide a list, get with Greg that morning, Some days, depending on when it falls, if it's on a weekend, we definitely give them the next business day. Like I said, the snowstorm was extenuating circumstances. We were there. And so we do that. And then once we get approval and confirmation through Greg, then we do make personal phone calls to them and suspend them and tell them, you know, as soon as we get your check, we make a follow-up phone call to them as well and turn them back on me.
So the letter is pretty much protocol. I mean, once you talk to them, express your concern, that you follow up with the letter. We might get progressive. I mean, is that what I'm seeing?
Commission President, that's probably true. We do document by Chapter 31. Every time they're late, we have to notify them of that late letter. 3 late occurrences of late reporting within a 12-month period can be cause for suspension and cancellation of the license on the agent.
Mr. President.
Yes.
But Jeff, on the 10th, if they're late, they are cut off.
Commission President, Commissioner Schmidt, that is correct. We don't actually do it on the 10th. We process them on the 11th. We look at it and then turn their machines on. So it's a very...
We do shut their machines off on the 11th, unless there's circumstances like the previous storm was that last week.
Commission President, Commissioner Schmidt, that's correct.
And you're saying right now there's about 20, 40 that occur every month, or has been since we made this change.
Commission President, Commissioner Schmidt, that's correct. Some months it fluctuates a little bit depending on weekend. If the 10th falls on a Saturday, the mail is usually collected at the post office, and when we get it on Monday, there's usually quite a few more there. So usually in those circumstances, it's maybe 10 or 15.
When did we implement that?
So Commission President, Commissioner Schmidt, the language was always in there that the payments were due by the 10th. We sent them late reporting if it wasn't received by the 25th. In October of 2018, we kind of started a soft rollout. We sent every licensed selling agent a letter telling them that had been directed. It was part of commission regulation. We had checked with our Attorney General representative, and we're going to start moving forward with this. And then in November was the first time we did it. We gave them a little bit of a cushion. I think in November it was about the 16th, and we called them, and you know, some of them, often people think as long as it's postmarked that they should be good. And so we kind of did a soft rollout in November.
Have you seen any kind of reduction, Jennifer, from when we first started to the 20 or 40 we're experiencing now?
Commission President, Commissioner Schmidt, we've seen different agents. So we definitely, once you contact them and turn their terminal off the first time, we haven't seen a lot of repeat offenders. We also did a lot of outreach with some of our agents who tended to be later and have talked to other agents who have contacted us, or as we call them, in ways that we can change their administrative process or help with their administrative process to get the checks here sooner. A lot of those payments come from a headquarters office located in a different state. And so we've encouraged them, their invoice is due on the 1st of the month. We don't need the actual physical copy. They can fax that invoice to their main headquarters office. They can email it, whatever they need to do to speed that process up. We can also convert them to a weekly agent, because then if they're billed weekly, they're not waiting for one licensed sales report on the 1st of the month as well. So there are options. The other thing I would like to mention is we are exploring options to go to an EFT or an ACH sweep of their accounts. That's a little work we're doing on the front end with the treasurer's office and then program. So we are exploring those options because we did hear that from our agents.
Thank you.
I would like to, I'm sorry, but I think that's 100% a cool idea. Trying to change this process. In this day and age, we're relying on the mail, postal service to get things on time. It's ridiculous. I highly encourage the department to try to find a better way to make these payments in this day and age. It's much better for all involved. I appreciate your effort.
Mr. President, I was asleep down here at the end of the table, but I'm wondering if you, Mr. President, Commissioner Smith did pass like ships at night. Maybe I heard it wrong. I understand this fluff, I'll call it. We're trying to be fair as possible, so we wait till the following day and all that stuff. Set that aside. On the 11th day, they haven't paid us, their terminal is getting shut off. Is that correct?
Commissioner Crank, that is correct.
And then call them and say, hey, your terminal's shut off. Correct?
Commissioner Crank, we actually reach out and talk to them first in extenuating circumstances where we haven't been able to get to somebody and have attempted multiple times during the day, we do. But otherwise, if we don't get a clerk or the agent in the initial call, we'll continue down our list before we send them. I think it's very important. A lot of times the person selling the license isn't responsible for the payment. And so it puts them in an unfair position if we just turn it off. So we do attempt every effort to call them and make contact with the store first and then suspend their terminal on that day, the day after the 10th.
I understand they're being incredibly gentle. But then they get a letter even after that saying the terminal's been turned off, fix this problem. Correct?
Commissioner President, that's correct.
No, I gotta say, Commission, this is ridiculous. These people get money up front. They either get a credit card payment, cash, or a check. It's an incredible benefit to their businesses to be able to sell these licenses and have us buy ammunition and guns and fishing equipment and all that stuff along the way. But it's ridiculous as much time and effort as we spend with these kind of incredibly talented people chasing money that they have in their cash register. Anybody who runs a successful business pays their bills on time. And so I have no patience for, we are incredibly gentle with these licensed selling agents. We bend over backwards. But at some stage, we need to quit because we have a fiduciary capacity over the sportsman dollars we're entrusted to run this program. We have incredibly talented people spending copious amounts of time chasing down people who just don't do what they should do running their business.
I agree with that, but also I don't want to make the scenario that you're privileged to sell. That's our number one revenue source. This particular business I'm talking about sells $4 million worth of licenses, and to my knowledge, I don't think he's been beyond the 15th. Is that right? I don't. Without saying names, maybe Greg, you and I need to talk afterwards. But I'm defending him that because I don't want the department to make it sound like be lucky that you're able to sell our licenses, but
David, I just disagree. If he's that successful, whoever this person is, if they're that successful in the business, pay your damn bills on time. He knows it's due on the 10th. He gets an invoice on the 1st.
Well,
he has 10 days to get that money to the department. So do your job.
But say he doesn't close his books until the 10th. He cuts the check on the 11th, and that's his business. I mean, that's his prerogative. He's not going to change his method because he's selling $250,000 worth of licenses and he gets $1 or $2 for it. It's still our number one revenue source.
David, I can't tell the game to fish. I closed my business on April 17th. So wait for my check till May 15th. I mean, there are rules. But it's part of operating within an orderly society. So if I can't tell the IRS I'm going to pay you 3 days late because I don't close my books till late, they're going to say, too bad, Craig. Here's 18% interest plus all this stuff. We are incredibly generous with these folks. And I just think the message needs to go out once and for all that you at least have one grumpy, old, bearded, fat guy at the end of the table who's happy. And I'm going to push as hard as I can to make these people just comply with our rules. I mean, we coddle them. We send them letters. We call them. We let them, I don't know how many times I've been slapped down. We didn't even pull their license selling application when they were 4 and 5 and 6 months late. We have to spend valuable attorney time chasing them down in court to sue them. And we lost $10 grand in a bankruptcy recently over a license LTD who didn't follow the rules.
Good example of why we got to get out of the dark ages. Agreed.
Yeah, Mr. President.
Yes.
What's the common, excuse reason I hear from vendors in my area is just the reliability of the post office. Some days it works well, some days it doesn't.
That's that.
I just think the solution to this issue is not exactly how we receive payments.
Exactly.
That's, if we can solve that problem to where they can get automatic withdrawal or some type of thing that you're talking about, I mean, that's gonna, all these issues go away.
Right. I mean, I get emails and notices from the department to collect $12. And it's got to cost us $112 to generate all the paperwork to collect $12. It's just insane. In today's world.
Easier way, because I think they ought to follow the rules too.
Well, there's rules that I realize that, and I'm 100% behind you with that on that, but I'm also concerned about our revenue source. We take this guy, if we take this guy, we say, or he says, I've had it, you guys do your own thing. Okay, we lose the $250,000, where are we going to pick that up at? We will pick some of it up, maybe most of it, maybe all of it, maybe, and then some, but we may not. And if we don't, then because it's not convenient to go down there anymore, pick up your license, buy your license. This same gentleman, and I think that we talked about this on Wednesday. Greg, every license they sell, they get how much? $1?
Commissioner,
Yeah, you get $2.
they get $2 on every license and 50 cents on every stamp license.
So, if in fact they sold the credit card, they lose that $2 like that, don't they? I mean, it's because they now have to pay the credit card back. Is that right?
Commission President, that is correct. So they, all of our agents are responsible for the fees on any credit cards they accept. We do not mandate that they accept credit cards, but they are responsible for those credit card fees and are not allowed to pass those on to the customers.
This guy doesn't accept credit cards because of that. So if he's doing $200,000 to $250,000 revenue on check and cash, there's something to be said about that. So we lose this guy, and maybe it's only a few $100s we find up losing overall. It's significant to me. I mean, that is our #1 revenue source. That's how we pay our bills. That's how we're able to grow it. Do the things we do. So I'm not saying that we need to look beyond the 10th of the month for this gentleman into business, but I'm thinking that until we have another source of streamline this better, like he was talking about, you're going to keep getting letters. I'm trying to avoid that. So
We did pass this.
Where do you draw the line? On which,
Is it based on making this change?
how many guys decide to change the rules?
Why bring this up? This is why I bring this
The
up.
system needs to be revamped.
I mean, our attitude is, and he point blank told me, and I've heard this several times from others, that it's a privilege to sell licenses because you know what, we're bringing business to them. Because the gentleman or the woman that walks in and buys a license is going to buy ammunition, maybe doors, loophole, whatever. That's not the case. That's not always the case, according to this one particular gentleman. Very, very little revenue source for him because he's selling licenses. So,
Mr. President, then, I mean, if it doesn't fit in his business model, he's a private business, you gotta get out of the business. I mean,
that's what I'm trying to avoid, go back.
someone else will pick up the license. I mean, we are incredibly gentle, incredibly welcoming to these licensed selling agents, but at some stage, rules are rules that you gotta follow. I absolutely agree with Pete and Mike that the solution to this is to change that as soon as they collect those funds, they're in our bank account. Because I think I said on Wednesday, if you go to Sam's Club and you write them a check, they don't even keep your check anymore. They give it back to you because those funds instantly electronically transfer. So we're running a $86 million business. That's not insignificant effort. So why can't we do that? I mean, I think that's the solution.
I couldn't agree more, but we don't have that opportunity. We don't have that luxury right now to scan a check, and go directly to Game and Fish. So, and I've seen it where you held on for 4 to 6 months before you cancel it. Am I right?
And that's what we tried to fix in October. We said, okay, we're not gonna be on the stream any longer. If you don't pay us by the 10th of the month, correct me if I'm wrong, but the commission directed, if you don't pay us by the 10th of the month, we're shutting you down, because we don't want that situation we had with the Scoflaw and Sheridan, who wouldn't go get his mail, wouldn't do anything, and he ended up owing us 20 or 30 grand. And they had to send the Attorney General's office to sue him in district court to recover our money that he had by that time for a year to 18 months.
And
So the system changed.
If I'm not mistaken, it was so unimportant for him that on his way over to the more or less previous case with Game and Fish, he stopped and spent a half a day fly fishing. So he was bragging about that, yeah. So I agree. I'm with the department 100% on that. But what I'm just trying to avoid big vendors like this. The little vendors, they matter as much as the big vendor, but they come and go. I don't know. I'm not pleading a case. I'm just expressing concerns.
Mr. President, I think that the discussion here amongst the commission has been healthy, and I think it's informed. It's given us some good information. It's some data to use to go and look at this thing. I think we talked yesterday, and we asked Greg to start an analysis of where we're at and see where we may be able to streamline this. And as Mike says, move into move that a little bit into the current century, not live in the dark ages, I think was his words. So I think we've got enough information to do that. The other thing I'll bring up, it's related, but it's kind of out of our control. But there is interest, I know, from the legislature doing something with licensing agents' ability to charge credit card fees. They reached out to me to receive some complaints from some of our licensing agents, and we've been in a dialogue about what may be.
So that is happening, though. I mean,
It's the discussion.
it's discussing.
Yeah, it's a discussion. It's not on an interim study topic list or anything. I have made the chairs of TRW aware of it, and I've been talking with Representative Barlow as well as
I can relay that there is some discussion about credit card fees. They have obtained their own credit card fees. So, possible. So, that's good. Any other questions?
We have to approve these, or
Commission President, yes, we will need commission approval for the changes made to Chapter 30.
President, I move that we accept those changes by the party.
It is motioned by Commissioner Pete Duty and seconded by Commissioner Galen Bird that we accept the proposal of the license changes regarding the Wyoming Game Fish. So, any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I hope I didn't put you on the spot. I wanted to make sure everybody is hearing what I'm hearing. So,
Thank you.
next on the item is good friend Scott Smith.
President Rael, Commissioners, Director Desmond, good morning. So I wanted to give you a brief update this morning on the 65th legislature that just ended this past February. And I know we've had some discussions already last 2 days on some of the bills that directly affect the Department and the Commission. This past session, we tracked about 70 different bills, some relevance to the department, 40 in the House and 30 over in the Senate. when it was all said and done, there were six bills that were passed both bodies and signed by the governor. That wanted to brief you this morning. This first one, let me frame this one up. If you'll recall, back in January, on the issue of regulating advanced hunting methods, the commission did pass or approve the department to move forward with the prohibition of smart rifle technology and barbed hook type arrows, but he also tabled any action on thermal or infrared imaging technologies and real-time video, real-time game cameras. He tabled that, waiting or pending the outcome of the legislation that was currently being discussed. And we'll start there. House Bill 2, the regulation of hunting methods, did pass. It was signed by the governor. And basically, to read some of the specific language there, the commission is directed and empowered to adopt rules regulating, limiting, or prohibiting the use of hunting technologies and the selling of wildlife geographic locations, specifically the three items: thermal or infrared imaging or other imaging outside normal visible light spectrum, real-time video photography equipment, or video imaging viewable remotely, and then thirdly, the selling of wildlife geographic location. So this bill did empower the commission to take action on those three specific items. It was not a broad authority to address all different types of hunting technologies, but those three in particular. Of interest, also in this bill, is something that I know a few of you had called and expressed some concern about. And let me read the exact verbiage so I don't mess this one up. But before promulgating any rule under this paragraph, the commission shall submit the proposed rule in writing to the Joint Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Interim Committee and appear before the committee upon request. So basically, before we can promulgate rules and regulations for these three specific areas, the department will provide in writing the proposed language regulating those three items. And then, if requested, we can appear before a scheduled interim committee meeting and answer any questions the committee may have. Once we then complete that portion of this regular statute, then we can go through the regular process of vetting and going through our rulemaking process as we normally do.
So, Mr. President, I got a quick question on that, Scott. You got to excuse my ignorance here with the DRW, but what is the purpose of it? I mean, we get the authority to put the regulation together, but we've got to go back to them basically for approval before we will promulgate the regulation. Is that right?
Mr. President, Commissioner Smith, that's correct. That is how this statute reads.
So why do they choose this regulation? Any ideas? I'm just curious why they would brought this one out and want to look at it.
I'm not, I guess I can't speak precisely on their intent, but they would like to at least have the opportunity to discuss any specifics that the Department Commission may come up with.
Some of the discussion there was there was a lot of amongst the committee. There was a lot of discussion about acquiescing powers that are currently held by the legislature to the executive branch. And so, our testimony really revolved around the fact that there are already many authorities that are given to the commission to set hunting seasons, as an example. But specifically on this, and they had this discussion on some of the other bills this year as well. They wanted to specifically have the department report to them during the interim.
In fact, a statement was made by the chairman at one point that he thought all regulations had to be this way, that they had to go to be heard by the TRW committee. So, you know, I listened and I heard their message loud and clear, and I think one of the things that we're going to try to do during the interim is not only this bill, but really give them a quick summary right up front of all regulations that were passed by the commission since the last time we talked to legislature. Not seeking approval, but just providing information to them so that they know so that we're as transparent as we possibly can.
All right, so moving on, the second bill, Director Nesbitt mentioned yesterday, House Bill 28, the regulation of shed antler and big game horn collection. Basically, this is an amendment to our existing, or we'll have to amend our existing Chapter 61. And basically, it increases the geographic area that our regulation cover. If you recall, prior to this, Chapter 61 addressed those public lands west of the Continental Divide between the time frame of January 1st and May 1st of each year. What this legislation changes is just it moves that line further east, and now it specifically states the commission may regulate the collection of shed antlers on public lands west of Interstate 90 down from the Wyoming Montana state line down to Buffalo, and west of Interstate 25 from Buffalo all the way to the Wyoming Colorado state line west. So basically, we've just shifted the area that we can apply this regulation. As I said, it's in Chapter 61, so we'll start as Director Nesbitt mentioned yesterday. Most all of these pieces of legislation become effective July 1st. We'll start working to formulate changes in the verbiage and work with the commission to promulgate these changes the next several months. So pretty simple one there, just broadens the geographic area that we have the authority to regulate shed antler collection. As you know, it continues to be a growing, popular late winter, springtime, early summer activity. There is continued issues with disturbing wintering big game animals during the most crucial part of the season. And this just provides us more flexibility to address some of these other areas, such as the Platte Valley, or areas where previously were not covered east of straightforward piece of legislation.
Scott, and I might have missed it when I was jotting my notes down here, but this also gives the commission the authority to kind of move the opening dates based on winter conditions, whatever the case may be, to kind of watch the best interest for our wildlife. Right?
President Ryle, yeah, Commissioner Schmidt, that's exactly right. They struck that specific time period and gave the commission that flexibility, the authority to. And as we know, several winters ago, we would have liked to have had that flexibility when it was still very wintry past May 1st, but we are bound by that timeline this year. It may absolutely happen in some areas again this year.
Thank you, sir.
And we don't have to report our proposed regulations to TRW in that matter.
President Ryle, Commissioner Doobie, no, in fact, those terms were specific to House Bill 2. That was it. Third piece of legislation that passed was House Bill 73, use of dogs to recover killed or wounded big game. This is a new statute, a standalone statute, and 23.3.109. And basically, what this piece of legislation set forth is any person may use one leashed blood-trailing dog to track a wounded, killed big game animal within 72 hours of shooting the animal And then it goes through a person may use a dog in this manner. And there's multiple subsections here. But basically the upshot of this is you shall maintain physical control of the dog at all times with a maximum of a 50-foot leash attached to the dog, either by a harness or collar. While tracking, you must wear fluorescent orange or pink, and also you may kill the wounded animal using any authorized weapon under the hunting license. And then upon killing the animal, you must attach the appropriate carcass coupon. And so basically allows within 72 hours to use a blood trailing dog to track wounded big game. House Bill 169, the fifth piece of legislation that was signed specifically related to game and fish, the lifetime fishing license for permanently disabled persons. Basically, this is the only one of the 6 that was effective immediately. We're presently working, Mike Choma is working on some language so that we can amend our powers and duties, section 23.1.302, or amend our regulation, chapter 44 to comply with this powers and duties. And basically what this one laid out was the commission shall, by rule and regulation, establish a process for issuing resident lifetime fishing licenses and conservation stamps at no cost to any resident who is permanently or totally disabled. And then they go on to define that term. And the definition of permanently and totally disabled means the presence of a permanent physical or mental condition that prevents a person from engaging in subsequent gainful activity. The challenge here, I think, for us will be the definition of substantial gainful activity. I know Mike Choma is working on that right now, and that's something we'll need to clarify as it relates to this piece of legislation. This definition of the permanently and totally disabled, the application, we will make sure we're consistent with statute and what's laid out already in my understanding with Social Security Administration. That's where this definition came from. So as we develop our amendments for Chapter 44, we will make sure we're consistent with what's already in place as it's in practice now with the Social Security application of that definition. Again, we're shooting to have this, since that legislation came effective immediately, we'll shoot to bring this to the commission by the July meeting. The fifth piece of legislation, Senate File 57's public records. If you'll recall, look at my notes here. We already have a policy directly related to public records requests, and we have an official custodian. And what this piece of legislation did was obviously tighten that down for those agencies that may not have a policy or official custodian. Mr. Mark Nelson, our department, handles public record requests on a daily basis. So this will be a pretty easy lift for us. We have everything in place. The only thing that that's in here that we need to address is we'll work with the Department of Administration and DA and I to get the information that's requested in this bill onto their website, more of a public outreach, so the public knows if they where to go if they wanted to make a public record request to the department. But a lot of what's in this piece of legislation is standard operating procedures for the department. get a public records request, we address it immediately. And all this did was outline a timeline that needs to be followed upon receipt of a public records request. And I think we do an excellent job responding to the public in those instances already. So I think that this will be, like I said, a pretty straightforward endeavor for our agents. And then the final one, you discussed in great detail already yesterday, but Senate File 93, grizzly bear hunts. And suffice to say, the department will continue to work with the commission on all matters related to that piece of legislation. So I don't think I need to repeat our discussion for topics from yesterday. So those are the six main pieces of legislation that were signed and enacted this legislative session. Happy to answer any further questions.
Appreciate what you do, Scott. You mentioned that you're going to bring that back in July, so you can stay on.
Mr. President, no, that does not mean I'll be staying on.
This will be sorely missed.
This might be a good time. The existing commissioners have discussed it. Good time, right?
Yeah, I think so. I did want to quickly mention just a couple other quick things for the commission. I was going to, if Scott was done, there was no questions. First of all, just for the commission's information, that the whole issue of preference points continues to be very, very contentious, and it continues to be a topic that's discussed across the entire state. There's legislators that are interested in it, and there's other legislators that realize that it's very split across our state. I mean, our own information indicates that it's about 50-50 as far as hunters that favor or disfavor preference points. I predict, though, this will continue to be an issue that will continue to be discussed in the legislature. I also predict you will continue to hear from constituents that it's an important issue for them, either to have preference points, to have bonus points, or to look at waiting periods that would achieve maybe some of the same thing that preference points could. The other thing that I wanted to mention is we made a recommendation on 4 interim study topics that are actually being decided on today. Management Council meets today, and we'll probably know by tonight or Monday which topics we're going to be responsible for during the interim. Those in TRW were AIS, the discussion about AIS, and this is a potential to have a broader discussion with more players, I think. So I think that'll be a good discussion. An informational presentation on CWD. Talked about that a little bit yesterday. This whole notion, the third one was this whole notion of fishing outfitting. It continues to be a concern for some legislators. It continues to be a concern for the public. That commercial use in some areas is either, the perception is that it's having an impact on the resource, or at least on their quality of their fishing experience. And so, the thought is rather than continuing to have these discussions kind of scattered, to have them, we're going to have them anyway. We might as well have them at TRW right now. And then the last was, again, another effort to try to get something done with bison licenses, to make them, to give the commission authority to treat bison licenses like the commission treats other big game licenses. Right now, it's not legal, as an example, to carry over bison license like it is for every other big game species. It's not legal to donate a bison license to the disabled veteran program, and simply it's an oversight, and it's all related to the definition of big game and the fact that bison are not big game in Wyoming. They have their own statutory definition. So anyway, we've asked the legislature to look at those 4 things. Both chairmen are agreeable to bringing those forward. There's some other things that they've got on their list as well. So we don't have no guarantees that those will be the interim study topics, but I suspect we'll have a very good chance that those will be the topics. And then, along with what Commissioner Crank was just talking about, we have had a discussion, and I think it would be, the commission certainly had an interest in legislation, and I think it would be a good thing for the commission to identify a subgroup of 3 commissioners that we would probably work more closely with on pending legislation. The department has opportunities in advance, sometimes of bills being introduced, to provide comments on all kinds of different things, fiscal impacts, as well as other recommendations before a bill is actually introduced. I think, based on this commission's interest, I think it would be beneficial for us to have a group that we could work with closer with the commission that would probably be a little bit more up on legislative issues and maybe a little bit more involved. We've asked the commission on certain matters to come down to Cheyenne and at least be present when the department testifies on different issues. It's not common, but we did have this past when we talked about migration corridors and grizzly bear hunts, or grizzly bears in general, in front of the Joint Appropriations Committee. We did ask some commissioners to come down for that. So anyway, I think that's probably what I've got as a recommendation, and get the commission to have a discussion about that.
I think personally it's a good idea to have a legislative subcommittee of the commission, because who has a better one, maybe has a better one too. Maybe something that the department does an amazing job with legislative stuff, but it may be that we have a little bit different experience or different thought process about a piece of legislation. I think an extra set of eyes on those things that are coming. So you understand how it works. A legislator comes up with an idea that kangaroo licenses should cost $100. So before that legislator makes that public, that bill will go to the department to see if there's a fiscal impact. And a lot of times the legislator is looking for help in making that work and make sure it works well. They appear hard and we want these things to function a little bit. So that comes to us in a confidential nature. And so I think if those were forwarded by the department to this group of commissioners, we could look at them and give our input. In a large majority of cases, I can say, we don't know, or sounds good to me, or on a rare occasion, we're going to say, well, that's a horrible idea, but it will help smooth this whole process out. So it's a good change. It would take some work on the 3 commissioners' parts. I don't know that they need to be prepared to travel to Cheyenne all the time. I mean, I think we have department folks that speak both for the department and can speak for the commission. And I think most 90% of the time we're going to be in lockstep with the department. But I just think it'd be a great additional help for the legislature and for the department.
I think that's a great idea. I think that not to contradict anything the department is doing, but to solidify and have a commission voice along with the department, whether good or bad. The department's for it or against it. The department's for it, 99.9% chance that the commission's for it.
Yeah, one thing I think that's important along those lines, Mr. President, is to understand our role with the legislature. Really, we have no, as members of the executive branch, we are not authorized to, nor do we have a role to do any kind of lobbying. We're not advocates. What we do have the ability to do, though, is to provide information on how potential legislation may affect the department or the commission. So that's the way we approach everything down there. We don't, if they ask us, do you support this or do you oppose it? We don't answer that question that directly. We tell them, based on our experience, based on our skills and expertise, we think it will have these impacts. But there's a fine line there between being a lobbyist and being a a member of the executive branch. Where I think there's some benefit to this is there's a lot of times this fishing outfitter, commercial fishing bill, commercial fishing outfitting bill is a great example of a time when legislators reach out to us well in advance and they want to have a discussion about this. That has a potential impact on the commission. That has a potential impact on the commission's budget, and it has a potential impact on your authorities and can broaden your authorities. So having a group identified to meet 2 or 3 times a year to talk about those kind of things, I think that's a lot of merit. Not to determine whether we support or oppose, but really what information we want to provide on legislation.
So, Mr. President, so in Pat Crank's crass vernacular, sometimes the department has to operate within rules that be more stringent on the department, depending on the administration. This is what Brian's talking about. They can't lobby, but they can present information. I think maybe the commission I think that a commissioner can say things a little bit differently than a department employee can in a rare circumstance. Because we're a little bit different beast. So I think maybe at times if there's a commission working group and the commission agrees, and I don't want anybody to get out in front of the commission as a whole, but if there's something that's maybe the commission believes is really not a good idea, I think a commissioner could show up in connection with the department and say, look, here's the department told you the information, but as a commission, as a governing body of the department, this commission doesn't think this is a very good idea. I think we could have to be very careful, but we could do a little bit different. The department can.
So as a body, we can't even say that we support this piece of legislation.
There's a thought process. Well, support is fine. Where you get into trouble is if a legislator, when they come up with an idea and they try to pass a bill, the best analogy I can give you, it's like their baby. They're very vested. And if you show up and say their baby's ugly, they don't like that. If you show up and say their baby's pretty, then they say, oh, well, great. Because they want our support and our credibility, but tell them their baby's ugly, it causes significant grief. So I think maybe the commission, if we want to, could show up and say, that's not the most beautiful baby we've ever seen, but it's certainly not pretty, so that, you understand where I'm going?
President Reynolds, if I may. And I think, we have the budget subcommittee, and I think over the last several years, we've all seen the benefits of having, as Commissioner Craig said, that extra set of eyes on, budget information. And I think you could pattern something very similar in this instance as well. When we get a piece of draft legislation, we sit down and brainstorm and try to figure out the pros and cons for the department. I think, as Mr. Crank said, having your expertise also doing that same thing would be a great benefit for the wildlife resources. I would see a lot of benefit. And as far as the lobbying thing, totally agree with Commissioner Crank. It was a very fine line there. But casting a broader net to look at the implications of proposed draft legislation. Very prudent.
Separate subcommittee. It's something important we see email in everybody's comments.
Sure, I think that'd be fine.
I don't know what you could do.
The only thing we need to be careful with is at one point in time, Brian told me this, that I think it got too formal. So the most recent administration was not very interested in having us involved for some reason. And Brian and the current administration administration is much more interested, that maybe that would be a good thing. But in prior commissions, apparently, every piece of legislation was emailed to the commission. They then would call a phone meeting and vote on it. It wasn't a public meeting. I would guess that that procedure they utilized then was in violation of the Open Meetings Act. We have a quorum of the commission taking action on a particular item. So we don't want to go there because it would be a violation of state law. But if it was very informal and, you know, if every commission member got the legislation and then if you felt strongly or had any opinion on it, we'd send out an email and then we discuss more. You have to be careful not to take action via email. So if you say, my gosh, this is a horrible idea, and the other 6 commissioners email in and say, boy, we agree, it's a horrible idea, there's an argument that we've taken action on an item without a public meeting, you know, and violate those meetings act. So we just need to be careful with that. I guess that's why I thought maybe 3 people, because you don't have a quorum.
Oh, and I
But we can do it. I mean, we just got to be careful. Follow the law. That's what we do every day.
I have nothing further, Mr. President. I do believe you have a blue sheet.
You do those, as the president calls it, at dinner.
Scott, thanks. I really appreciate it. It's been a heck of 4 years. But it's very informative, and I appreciate your presence. So thank you. Yes.
Those are specific to this agenda.
Well, they both are. So,
Okay, we'll have a call to the public. We have 2 blue sheets here, and again, I'd like to advise you that we'd like to keep the 2 to 3 minutes. I don't want to be rude and interrupt you, but I will. Kristen Gunter.
Mr. President, members of the commission, and I will be brief, I promise. I'm from the Wyoming Outdoor Council, and I just wanted to touch on a couple of the bills from this session, to use Commissioner Crank's analogy, a couple of the prettier babies that we saw this session. Briefly to touch on HB 28 again, the shed hunting bill. We held a series of outreach events during the legislative session afterwards among our membership. We found that to be a pretty non-controversial bill with our membership. The conservation need for that bill is pretty clear. And we know that many among our membership are very supportive of that bill. We're supportive of the bill. We're supportive of the commission being granted this authority. And so we'd love, there are public open meetings around any of the shed hunt, sort of the next steps around implementing these changes east of the divide, any of the season setting stuff. I think our membership would be really interested in showing up and being supportive at those events. So we'd love the opportunity to really turn out the conservation-minded public on that bill. The second thing I wanted to mention just briefly, it's not a wildlife specific bill, but HB 99, Wyoming Public Lands Day, is a bill that the Outdoor Council, along with many other groups, conservation, sportsmen, labor groups, faith groups, supported as members of the Keep It Public Wyoming Coalition. And Wyoming Public Lands Day is going to be September 28th. It'll be the 4th Saturday in September every single year. And it's a day in statute, it simply recognizes the importance and the value of public lands in Wyoming to our wildlife resources, you know, all kinds of the resources, the economy, the quality of life that we enjoy in this state. But additionally, in addition to simply recognizing the value of public lands, it's also an opportunity for service projects. It's a big part of why we talked about this day. And we hope that it's an opportunity for agencies, for nonprofits, for all kinds of different groups to work together, to come out and do projects that might help our wildlife or support our public lands in different ways. So I wanted to just highlight that. I think you'll find a lot of enthusiastic support for that day among groups who worked on it and supported it. And we're very much looking forward to creating service opportunities for the public to come out and get involved. So I wanted to advise you about that. And I'll stand for any questions.
Questions? Kristen, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Derek?
Mr. President, members of the commission, my name is Derek Farmer, Executive Director of Wyoming Hunters and Anglers Alliance. My organization believes that we can accomplish a lot through legislative action, and by supporting the elected officials that are making wildlife-friendly decisions, we think we can do better for wildlife as well. This session was very successful, we believe, and happy to report that the current group of legislators seem to be very responsive to our suggestions and have been making good wildlife decisions. We can agree that the department here has dedicated staff. We've seen that time and again. And the employees believe they have the best job in the world. It shows. Let me just tell you, if these employees didn't have the support of the management, of the commission, of all the division chiefs, they wouldn't feel that way. I feel like I have the best job in the world too, but I have wonderful managers. So kudos to the management. It really is shown through the dedication of the staff. At the legislature, I was able to see this dedication on a whole new level. And that was through the Game Wardens Association. They were a vital partner in our efforts to protect and preserve wildlife. These guys, the department cannot lobby for or against a bill. But these guys came out on their own time, on their vacation time, to stand up for wildlife. And that just shows a whole nother level of dedication that your employees have. And that's all because of the way the department is managed, I believe, and who you hire. So thank you all for creating this culture of dedication that you have. It's wonderful. On the bills that we lobbied for, the regulation of hunting methods, one thing I wanted to highlight with that is it was an amendment there to make the department present in front of TRW. But later on, we worked to get an amendment so you only had to provide written notification of what that rulemaking would be. We felt like it was a little bit of excessive legislative oversight for the department, and we were working to find a way to oppose that. HB 28 shed hunting was a very contentious topic. We learned through testimony of one of the senators that they received hundreds of emails opposing the shed antler bill. And he said that he didn't realize how big of a problem it was until he received hundreds of emails. Then he understood the pressure that was out there on the wildlife. And so it is a contentious subject. I recommend that you take Dr. Gunther and the Outdoor Council up on their recommendation to be part of that public process. Getting people who are supportive of that bill to these meetings will be critical to making sure that it's received well. And our organization would be glad to help with that, and many of the other sportsman groups would be as well. Along with that, I would like to request that there's further designation on winter ranges or refinement of what these winter ranges look like. I think there's additional data that could be used to refine the winter ranges, and hopefully that would provide clarity in what we're looking for what areas need to be protected with the shed hunting. HB 99, I want to echo what Dr. Gunther said. The Public Lands Day is the fourth Saturday of the month. The majority of Wyoming hunters and anglers use public lands and the public access that you provide to be able to enjoy our sports. So thank you for what you do to increase our access. And we would love to have you guys engage with the hunting and angling community on this day. And then we also think it would be good to have additional field staff available because there will be more people in the field on that day. There has been discussion about the ability to engage the non-consumptive user as well. And I think that this would be a great day to arrange activities to show how the department would be able to support maybe some of those non-consumptive users. And I guess with that, keep it brief. I'll stand for any questions.
Questions? Derek, I appreciate it. commission appreciates it. I'm not sure what you said. Say it again if you like.
Yeah, well,
You had 4 minutes. So.
okay. Well, thank you for your
Thanks,
gracious time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot to digest right away. Appreciate your concern. Let's see now. Greg, is there any real quickly any more call from the public on that item? Go forward, Greg, Chris, with this vote.
President Rael, Commissioners, Director Nestle, good morning. First issue I have involves a transfer of ownership for a licensed selling agent for Red Lodge Home and Hardware in Red Lodge, Montana. And the recommendation is to approve the transfer. The business was sold in January of 2019, and anyhow, transfer of ownership and get the transfer for the licensed selling agent and the oath of office. We've got all that in place.
So moved. Second.
It is moved by Commissioner Pat Frank and seconded by Commissioner Pete Dooley. Any discussion? Call to the question. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes carry. Number 17, Craig Phipps again.
Yes, President Rael, this one is a cancellation of a licensed selling agent. And it involves Dick's Sporting Goods in Casper. We've got a history of late payments, underpayments, and failure to submit their annual bond. Paperwork by the deadline as well. Currently, we have 11 agents in Casper. Dick's Sporting Goods as an agent was established in October of 2013. They're a full license selling agent. Their sales in 2017 were $10,976, and that's a little less than 1% of all the Casper license sales. Total Casper sales for all the agents is $1,246,000. We have 5 agents in Casper that do over $100,000 a year, and this particular agent has been late on payments 15 times in the last 5 years. After sending the notification, we did receive notification back from Dick's Sports that they plan to represent themselves concerning this case. I don't know if we have Mr. Kevin Beers here.
For the record, it doesn't appear that anybody from Dick's Sporting Goods is here to
That's great. Did they notify that there was a chance to contest this cancellation occur today, Cody, in front of the Game Fish Commission?
Mr. President, yes, Commissioner Crane.
How were they notified?
They were notified in writing and provided a copy of the agenda. Is that correct? I've got to refer to Jennifer real quick.
Commissioner President, Commissioner Crank, I did reach out via email. I had been in correspondence with Kevin Beers, and I did tell him the time of the agenda and that he would have an opportunity to present comments to the commission and make a presentation. And he acknowledged that receipt of that email of the agenda time.
So you actually have a written email back from him saying, got it.
Commissioner President, yes, I do.
Ray, just out of curiosity, maybe you haven't, maybe you don't, but how late were they on each? On the 15 times that you got them? I'm just curious.
I can review the previous four. I've got that handy in my notes, Mr. President. For their October 2018 IPOS payment, which would be due November 10th, that one was received 10 days late on November 20th. Their May 18 IPOS payment and April 18 payments were received July 13th of 2018. So both of those were significant.
That's okay, Greg. I think you set the records right now.
Mr. President, would anyone recognize Mr. Beers, or if we look down in the hall and see if there's a wayward soul sitting out there wondering where to go? Could we do that, please, quickly? And then, Mr. President, can we call it Mr. Gewalt? David, if the person who wants to contest a license cancellation is notified, according to Jennifer McCurd, and she actually has written documentation that occurred if they failed to appear at the time scheduled by the commission for this hearing. It appeared to me that they waived the opportunity to contest this. Is that a correct legal conclusion?
Mr. President, Commissioner Frank, yes, it is. You have no duty to continue it here.
So, Mr. President, I would move that we uphold the department's cancellation of Dick's Sporting Goods license. So,
Commissioner Pat Frank has moved that we accept Greg Pitt's recommendation, the department's recommendation that we cancel this license selling agent. And it is seconded by Commissioner Mike Schmidt.
Mr. President, if I may, Rebecca just reminded me we are a little bit ahead of schedule on the agenda, so that may be something to consider.
how far ahead are we?
10 minutes.
Why don't we, how about this? How about if we have discussion, maybe we can do it now, but we can delay the vote on this for 10 minutes. And I'd note that it looked like several people went out in the hall and searched for some representative from Dick's Sporting Goods, and I don't see anybody saying they found anybody. Is that accurate, Jennifer?
Jennifer, did he, I might have missed it, but did he, in your correspondence with him, did he say he was going to be present?
Commission President, I told him he would be able to present to the commission, and it was up to him whether he chose to do that. And he just acknowledged receipt of it, but I did tell him the agenda was at 9:30.
Does Dick's owe us any money at this time?
Commission President, no, they are current.
I would suggest that we table this to the end of our meeting today to give it every opportunity. Rather than wait 10 minutes and just go to the very end and that's the last agenda item.
I'm surprised, 15 times at this point, why haven't we already canceled?
Mr. President, Commissioner Byrd, I think this, kind of gets back to the earlier discussion a little bit, as far as, how do we handle the late payments? Did we have the ability to do to disable their systems, get the letters out right away? So I think it gets back to the process question. And there's that balance piece as well that was discussed earlier about, letting the commissioners know, letting them know, hey, we're going to turn off their systems. We've got late payments, and are we good with that? Are we not good with that? And so it's this whole process that at least I've seen in the past year of us trying to tighten up the standard and hold everybody to a consistent standard so that we have a unified expectation of what's out there with our licensed selling agents. So, hey, go ahead.
Thanks, Frank. Any other questions? Great, Jennifer, you guys do a great job. You guys are good cop, bad cop, so we appreciate what you guys do.
Am I a good cop?
You're always a good cop, man. All right. So we'll table this until the last agenda. It will be our last agenda on this meeting. Thank you. We don't need a motion or anything like that. Okay, now let's take a 10-minute break, please, real quick. What time is it? 9:30. We'll be back at 9:40. Thank you.